Call the work session to order. First item on our agenda is presentation from the Mine Run Volunteer Fire Company. Jeff,
Sir.
You're up.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for your time. I guess I'll start off by apologizing that it's taking me this long to get here, but as Mr. Crozier would tell you, I'm getting old and I've slowed down a little bit.
Just a little.
Just a little bit. All I wanted to do was take a few minutes. I don't have an official presentation, but to kind of bring you up to speed on where we are in our operations with the County of Orange Fire and EMS, and I invite Chief Moore to jump in when he thinks we need to. As you know, we started out with having then John's crews were staying in my station off and on during the day. God, I don't even remember, it was probably 2010 or something like that when they first came in the station. And then as they transitioned out to Route 20, I signed an MOU with you gentlemen, and we put a pumper in that station, and that pumper is still there. Although it's killing us, because as you know, it was wrecked a couple of years ago, and even though it gets fixed, it becomes a maintenance nightmare. And it's getting a lot of use. As part of that, what we did was we took the opportunity to transition a lot of our things to a unofficial combination station. So what do I mean by that? We looked at the amount of time we were spending on training and maintenance and various other things, and what we tried to do was combine them together so that we could take advantage of the significant experience that I have in my station doing fire with several of my members, and then of course taking advantage of all the experience that Chief Moore's people bring on the emergency medical side. Off the bat, as you would suspect, the challenge was just getting our people to get along. It was, we at Mine Run kind of lived through the Spotsylvania nightmare after that unfortunate fatality and the bad feelings. And I have a lot of Spotsylvania members that are part of my station. But we figured out how we could do it and get them in one room, so we fed them. Brought all the officers together, gave them a free meal, and while they were eating, we started asking a bunch of questions, and that was the first opportunity that they actually talked as firefighters and EMTs and medics, and it's worked out well ever since then. We don't have perfect days every day. We still have challenges, but one of the goals was that we would eventually get to the point that our company officers, Mort's and mine, would handle most of the issues at their level, and we would have to stop handling them at the chief's level or the board level or whatever the case may be. While it's not a perfect marriage, we're doing extremely well together. We're doing a lot of training together, and Captain Wilson is helping in that area as we move forward. We're doing a lot of maintenance together. We're running a lot of calls together. I'm probably on as many medical calls as they're on fire calls. But the winners in this whole thing is the residents of Orange County. Our pumpers are getting out when they need it. I've yet to have a resident tell me that they know the difference between our uniforms and the county's uniforms. All they know is there's a big red machine there when they want a big red machine. And it's been great. All that's worked out, and I think the county and the residents have benefited from this. We're still working through challenges, and we'll deal with that, but we're looking to the future now. So we've gotten through most of the hard stuff, and the people are getting along extremely well, some of which now work for the county on the COFM staff, which is good because it keeps them in the county when they're off and makes them available for calls. But while still unofficial, we're looking at what's that next phase. That makes us even more productive and more positive. So a lot of the things, we're continuing the integration of operations. As Chief Moore will tell you right now, most of their focus on my pumpers is going to fire calls. Whether it's a structured fire primarily, or what we call smells and bells, fire alarms, or an entrapment in a car, meaning that if there's somebody stuck and the car is on fire, they will take a pumper if they're available. We keep them in county. They don't do the mutual aid runs. We still cover that in Spotsylvania County. But we're doing a lot of our own training together. So we're doing things like entanglement trainings and extrication trainings together and things of that nature. Primarily so that our individual officers at the company level get used to directing each other's people. And my people are used to it now. So now when they pull up to a call, they don't say, why is Captain Sakura in charge, why isn't it you? Now they're so used to it, they just go up like any other command function, and they take their orders and they proceed. So that's extremely well. We're working for the first time, and I'm working with Captain Wilson, that to do what we call our IDLH training, right? So when we're in burning structures and we're using air packs and stuff, this will be new, and we'll be doing a lot of that training together. We operate together like that now on house fires, but we haven't done a lot of dual training in those areas. The biggest challenge I see going forward, and they may have a different opinion, is obviously my folks are predominantly at work during the daylight hours, and his folks are all on shifts, so trying to get as many people as you can together for a dedicated training environment like that can be tough, because you're talking about an 8-hour day. We're also eventually working towards, I have 7 certified EMTs. I have 3 more in class. As we all know, the career staff is running like crazy, even with the volunteers at 29. On some days, there's just not an available ambulance because there's just more calls than we can handle. So what we're hoping to do is, once we get the last of the people out of class, we will work on a release program with Chief Morton and his crews. And when I have people available, if a basic level call comes out and we have one of his reserve units in my station, my people will be released, and the decision to assist the EMS will be mine or whatever officer I have in the county. But that'll give us an ambulance when we're not on a fire call, which is, you know, obviously, again, focused on him helping out the residents of the county. Although I'm going to refurbish my tanker right now because, you know, I paid more money than I wanted to pay for my wagon, but that's just the nature of the things. Eventually, we will have to replace engine 21, and Chief Mort's people will be on that committee with us. So when we build that pumper, it'll be mine run and the county that'll decide how we build that pumper. I mean, if you know my units, you know they're kind of multi-purpose, because there are days when we're coming from one call and we have to go to something completely different, that I can't afford to have specialized units, you know, like heavy squads, or whatever the case may be. And then most importantly, and one of the last things is we will focus next year on getting all the requirements done to take what I call Station 21A, which is the station that's on Route 20, and get that ISO certified. So right now it is not. If you call an insurance company, I say I have a pumper in that station, they'll go, I don't care, it's not certified, right? State of Virginia still does ISO. So we will work on getting that station accredited so they recognize it as a fire station, and that'll make our citizens a lot happier, because for the folks that are within that 5-mile radius of that station, that'll decrease their insurance. And so in general, everything is going extremely well, better than I thought it would at this time. Overall, I think we get along extremely well, and we work through our challenges, and there'll always be challenges and issues, but they've gone from everyone being a major issue to, in most cases, it's a minor issue. And my biggest success with that, or our success with that, is I don't have anybody complaining to me now when one of Mort's officers disciplines one of my firefighters, or vice versa. So we've kind of walked away from, or gotten away from the you're volunteer, I'm career that we started out with. What I think is probably our greatest achievement, and I don't know if Chief Mort has anything else to add in that area. Although Captain Sikora is a challenge, but he's a good guy. Any questions?
Question,
Yes.
I've always been concerned about having 2 facilities trying to
Right.
work together. Do you have any of your people that are assigned to what you're calling 21A, that are assigned there as a primary point, or how are you handling the sort of the toing and froing
Right.
between the stations?
So
I mean, they're close, but they're not.
Right, so, and you
beside
may
each
know that my membership is pretty dispersed.
Right.
We don't have a 5-mile rule like a lot of the other stations. I have, I wanna say, 6 members that live off of Burr Hill Road, or in that general area,
Right.
and their primary station is 21A.
Okay,
So
so
when
you're
we
up-
get a structure call, they go to that station.
Okay.
And then it's nice, they'll grab that pumper, instead of us grabbing the wagon, we'll grab the tanker or whatever in the next piece out of it.
So that, you've worked that out from
Oh,
a
yes, sir.
logistics standpoint?
Yep, and my folks have the combination of that station. Obviously, we don't have combinations to where they keep the drug boxes and stuff, but to get into the bay, we have that combination. And they have ours. They come to my station to get equipment, wherever the case may be. Any other questions, concerns?
You mentioned apparatus.
Yes, sir.
Is there, do we have I know we're gonna see the new CIP soon, but is there a replacement, schedule for the apparatus that you're beginning to be concerned about or have maintenance, at least maintenance cost issues? Is that something that's, maybe Chief?
Yeah, I know on the Volunteer Chiefs Association side, they have worked through a spec for an engine and a tanker. We asked them to work through an engine and tanker spec so that the county can try to leverage getting them into a process. The last piece of information we're looking at is hours on engines. And then at that point in time, the Chiefs Association will come present to the board that they've decided on a common spec and start using the CIP money to replace apparatus.
Board recalls, we've been contributing to a apparatus replacement fund, but until there was a common spec, I think, is understanding, and I think there was also an inventory of understanding what everybody has.
And we've done the inventory. And I drafted the instruction. We just have to get together and come to a final agreement so that it can be presented to you. And I believe Chief Johnson and Chief Moore will do that since he's the president. So,
I have a question for Morgan. The EMT release program, how's that working?
So right now, they will follow the same standard program that we do. The chief here himself, years ago, actually went through the release program. So Chief Mendonca is a release EMT within the county. I am excited that once we get these people out of this class, we start riding, because having that extra ambulance on the street, again, it's not our ambulance, it's not their ambulance, it's everybody's ambulance. So the fact that they're willing to do that is outstanding. I mean, we've had a long running relationship with Mine Run. I think 08, 09 is when we started going to their station and helping staff their units. Some of that is a lot of their members also ran with OCRS. So we got to see the chief here all the time because he was an OCRS member. But we're gonna work through those. It will be the same county release process. We're not looking at shortening that process at all.
A little tougher for the volunteers because of the,
But I'm gonna keep hiring his people, so.
maybe heresy for me to say so, but I like that concept.
And the folks, it's getting just as difficult on the fire side. I mean, more and more of our stuff it used to have, once you did it, we didn't have to do it anymore. Even things like the EVOC is going to an expiration point, so every so many years, we're gonna have to redo EVOC certs and all that other stuff. So, but we realize that, I don't know what the real number is, I'll pick it out of the air, 80% of our calls in this county are EMS related. I used to say, thank God we don't have many structure fires, but I should have shut up, because the last 3 weeks have just been terrible. The one thing I didn't mention, because it really doesn't has effect on Mort's people, is with the new Spotsylvania Fire Chief, we're getting a lot more calls in Spotsylvania for mutual aid. And because of that, the battalion chief for our area, when I say ours, as it relates to Spotsylvania, 7, 9, those areas, we're gonna be starting training with them, doing rural water supply training, things of that nature. So,
Their battalion chief's been responding into the county, hasn't he?
yeah, Lonzy, is that right? Lonzo. Great guy, really young for a battalion chief, he's extremely motivated, so we're starting to do a lot over there, and he's teaching a lot at my station, so that works out well.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay. Second work session item, amendments to the Orange County personnel policies. From the look of this, we should have just taken a piece of paper and a back piece of paper and put a new manual in.
We're
not-
working on it.
We're not there yet, that's to come.
Well, there was a lot to chew on in our package, let me put it that way. Allison, you're gonna take the lead on this?
Yes, sir. As you know, last year, April 2017, We applied for deviating status from the Virginia Department of Social Services. That would allow them to fall under the local umbrella, so no more managing employees between the state's policy manual and our policy manual. We would be all together. Because we had some leadership changes at the local agency and the state had a tenured regional director retire, it kind of delayed review of our application. I'm happy to say that, I guess starting back in July, we met with the state staff, and we've been going back and forth on some narrative language to kind of help them understand what our processes and our HR policies and system looks like here. And what it really boiled down to are the changes that you see in front of you. So I'm happy to make that report. There is one additional change that I'm working through that will have to come back to you all is changes to our Family Medical and Leave Act policy. We weren't exactly ready to put that in front of you this evening, but if it's just 8 policies that rose to needing changes, I am happy to report that. So the list is there in front of you. I'm just going to go briefly through them. I know that you all have had the opportunity to look at them. If you have any questions, stop me. If you want to go policy by policy, we'll do that. So the first policy is regarding types of employment. We modernized some of the language and made some of the language consistent with our existing personnel policies. The largest change in this policy was the inclusion of an employment classification as an emergency position. This is not something that the county has really allowed for in the past, although I can think of a number of situations when it would have been beneficial. However, it is an employment class that the state recognizes and that social services uses frequently, and we wanted to propose that so that social services wouldn't lose that ability upon deviating status. And what an emergency position would do is it would allow an employee to be recruited without going through the competitive selection process, without fully advertising the job through our regular channels. It could be through a staffing agency. It could be through a pool of maybe retired social services employees that could come in, just to fill a gap. And what we have proposed in line with the state policy is that this emergency positions would be time limited. So they would be used to fill an immediate identified need in the agency or in a county department if this is adopted. And they would be used for no more than 180 work days in a 12-month period. So that is the largest change in this policy, other than some of the other minor language changes just for consistency.
And the difference between the emergency and temporary, and for that matter, part-time, but primarily temporary, is that the temporary, it appears to me, can, as long as it has an identified ending date, it can be more or less than the 180. But I assume that that the recruiting for that position has to be competitive. Is that, I was trying to make sure I understood the difference between emergency and temporary, because to me, they sounded like the same beast.
Yes, so there's
But apparently they're not.
There's 2 differences, and you touched on them. Temporary positions we are currently using in the county, and practice is that they are competitively selected. So a temporary position may be for, if we know there's an upcoming medical.
Is it our policy decision that they be competitive, or is there a DSS state requirement that it be competitive? Where does that competitive requirement come from?
So the competitive requirement is coming from our recruitment and selection policy.
Okay.
Right now in the recruitment and selection policy, there is no means in that policy at all for, recruitment without a competitive selection process. So that policy defines minimums of where and how long we advertise a job, and it does not allow for, selection without competitive advertising. So, that's the first biggest difference is those are competitively advertised and recruited. Whereas an emergency position, you may not have as much notice or time to prepare. So you can select them without the competitive process, but they are, there's a greater limitation on the amount of time that you can use an emergency position. A temporary position, has to be for a limited duration, and it's typically identified at the time that that employee is hired. But they're not limited to that 180 work days.
Would, excuse me, would somebody that teaches, one of the athletic programs for Parks and Rec would be a temporary employee?
Yes, sir.
So typically, it's a specific duration for a specific task.
Or you had a grant that was going good for a year, that you'd have managing a grant or something?
Yes, yes, that would be used for.
the emergency position fall for, say, the 911 center, where it's critical to have minimum staffing, and for whatever reason, you're down?
We,
that-
we went through some of that hiring when we were down staff and we needed some fill-ins, and we got some dispatchers from other localities to fill in. Gentlemen, I went ahead and made a decision to allow that to happen just because of the mission-critical nature.
But that would be one of these
This would now catch the
situations.
policy up
Right.
to some decisions.
So
I
this,
made.
this policy would apply to all departments, I think,
Yeah.
or generally speaking. all
Generally
departments.
speaking, but there's gotta rise to, I know how Crystal's been able to use it. She's been able to hire emergency employees, particularly in, family and children's services, the child protective services and adult protective services, because of just the nature of, you need somebody there to do that work that's qualified. I think in this typical, we would now have this as an option. It would be an option that really had to meet a pretty strong test.
No, absolutely, that,
And the other thing is safe, it's only for 180 days, so it gets us a bridge.
What, when I'm looking at either that or the temporary, if you bring in a retired person, does that screw up their retirement, Virginia retirement system?
We typically don't give them advice in that regard. They usually know that, coming into it. So we wouldn't give them that advice, but as an emergency or temporary, they are considered a part-time employee. The only thing that we are providing them is legally mandated benefits, so the tax withholdings and things that we have to do.
Which
But
doesn't include retirement.
no, sir.
Okay.
yeah, the VRS is not affected. I checked on that, prior to my election.
Right, typically they know what the salary threshold is
Okay.
and kind of monitor that.
So I guess at the end of the day, this emergency position would allow, it would keep what social services now does, and then allow us to catch up what we've had to use in practice, catch the policy up with practice. In rare circumstances, we've had to use initial critical services. Is that?
Yes, fair statement.
And the difference then between both
Sorry.
temporary and emergency versus part-time ends up being a matter of benefits among other things. Part-time, it sounds like, or at least eligible pending his determination for certain benefits, maybe not the full slate.
Right, and we did add some of that language in our part-time position, but you're exactly right. We don't use the word permanent because we don't make implied promises to any of our employment policies. But a part-time position would have a regularly scheduled work week. They don't have an identified duration of employment. And they again would get all legally mandated benefits, including if we had to offer health insurance due to the Affordable Care Act and any kind of federal health insurance standards. And then, like you said, at the discretion of the county administrator and in line with any of our benefit program agreements, we could offer benefits to part-time employees. It has not been current practice to do so.
And I don't foresee anything. The only time we would offer part-time benefits would be an extraordinary situation where we have a qualified candidate, it's a tough-to-fill position, we can fill it on a part-time basis, but they may want access to health insurance or something like that. Much like the school bus drivers, I mean, they get health insurance benefits. I'm not quite, but it just gives us more recruiting flexibility, particularly in a tight labor market.
The only other sort of twist in this that I see, it always sort of makes me pause, is the last definitional item, essential employee. And basically, it's really simple, there's a list, if you're either on it or not on it, I get that, but.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is, could theoretically an emergency position be on the essential employee list? Or a temporary position on the essential employee list?
Yes. Yes.
For example,
Well, because my mind is in social services, that's the route that I'm going, but the majority of social services positions are designated essential because in the event of an emergency, if a shelter is activated, those employees are required to report to work and help with the shelter operations. So they are designated as essential employees, and theoretically, we could have one. The same in Brian's mission critical example, if we had a communications officer in a temporary position, or an emergency position even for that matter, we could have them designated as essential. It has been our practice when we are recruiting and hiring people, it is listed, your essential designation is listed on the position announcement. With language, may be required to report to work in the event of an emergency or on holidays, weekends. We try to be as transparent as possible when we're recruiting the position, and also as a condition of the job offer, that designation is.
But it doesn't have any, I mean, it's independent of part-time, temporary, or emergency.
Yes, sir. And Tom and I actually talked about this earlier. To me, this essential employee definition felt very randomly placed in this policy. While I suggested changes to the definition, we haven't suggested moving it to a new policy yet because there are changes that probably need to be made to our administrative leave policy, which is generally when your essential and non-essential designation would really come into effect. But I think ultimately, this definition will be moved to a better suited policy in the future.
But the key change that you made here is that it once fell to the county administrator to make the designation, build the list. That has been, omitted. So who builds the list? Who has the authority now to build the list?
So the active position classification list is included as the included in the annual budgeting process. And that has been practiced for at least the 6 to 7 years that I've been here. It's not been an annual designation that Brian has made, which was kind of one of the reasons for the change.
let me step one back earlier. You all approve all position classifications, so when you approve that position, it'll be designated as essential, non-essential, and then from that, it's picked up under an annual act, because we have positions that are classified but not filled, that don't show up as filled.
So you're saying the only way to be on that list, though, is to take a position that has previously been designated and listed.
That's correct.
All of our positions are listed, every single one of them.
Including emergency and temporary?
Yes, sir. And there's a column for your essential and non-essential designation. So both essential employees and non-essential employees show up on the same position classification list.
Okay.
That's also the same list where we where we include your Fair Labor Standards Act designation. So an employee can look at that list and know if they are classified as exempt or non-exempt under FLSA regulations.
All right.
We had to make a fair amount of changes and updates to that last year, didn't we?
We were slated to make some changes. There were some changes to the exempt and non-exempt designation that were done, I believe, at the end of former President Obama's service, and they were supposed to go into effect, and then they were halted at the beginning of President Trump's.
There was a lawsuit.
There was. So we didn't make those changes, but everything that I've been reading says that there will be a new salary recommendation in March of 2019 that we might have to keep an eye out on that would affect salaries. And
When the board, when you all did the comprehensive market adjustments across the comprehensive several years ago, we went and made some
All
conscious
those.
decisions on who's exempt and non-exempt.
Yes.
Not last year, then.
Right.
we did, yes, as part of the
Longer back than I
market
realized.
study.
That was a couple, 3 cycles ago.
Okay.
Any other questions on that policy? No. The next one is a policy that you'll recognize from last year when we did the initial application. We had to update our equal employment opportunity policy to include affirmative action. And this year we had to go a step further and include our commitment to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this policy had some minor changes just to include language for the ADA. And you'll see that we added subsection G with language that just recognizes accommodations for Americans with Disabilities Act. And it is a federal requirement that we have to comply with anyway. It's just now defined in our policy. We also include ADA language on all of our job descriptions that, we will make reasonable accommodations for, any employees with disabilities, so.
The question I had there in the very last paragraph under, well, I guess it's still G, where, yeah. We say that if the accommodation is denied, can be denied, who makes that determination? We say if it's places an undue burden on the county.
Probably the courts at some point.
Yes,
Yeah, I
probably.
mean, we're just gonna assume that's a court.
I would
Pres-
yield to my county attorney, on any
Can we
accommodation.
write that in there, county attorney?
But ultimately, if it were appealed, it would likely end up in court. There's a lot of,
But somebody has to make the determination to deny it before it goes to court. I mean,
Yes.
that's all, that's why I'm just trying to chase down, do we have a process in place that makes that first determination, yea or nay, whichever?
Well, the way it works right now is I just get a phone call, the employee's got this issue and they would like us to do this, and we kind of try and talk through what that would cost us and effect on efficiency. And I mean, we haven't had many of these, but the few that we've had, it's been conversation, and we came up to, and all of them came with what I thought was a reasonable solution.
I guess my question is, do we need to have an assigned responsibility for making that determination, or are we better to stay silent as we are now? I don't have a preference.
It's so case by case anyway, that I don't know that you could draft anything other than call the lawyer.
And a lot of it depends on the type of employment that the person's looking for. If they wanted to join the majority of people in our audience right now, the case would be a lot more to that the cost is prohibitive.
Well, but the issue is we now have put a section in our policy that says we want to be compliant, we want to, accommodate these people.
But as Alan
As it
says,
should
that's
be.
already the state law, that's already the federal law anyway. All our policy is doing is mirroring what we legally are obligated to do.
But I think eventually it would come to the county administrator.
Yeah, I'm thinking through, Tom's call, Tom, can we make this accommodation for an employee? Resolve it. If we don't resolve it, then the department head's gonna have to say, no, we can't. Then that person certainly would be able to, or I would be brought in if it's a denial kind of thing. At some point, I would have to formally act to deny the accommodation.
Yeah, I mean, the situations I've had have been, for example, one with a library, where the employee could do everything but lift boxes to put away books, and so a decision had to be made. You know, how critical is that to the job? Can somebody else do that? Is there some other way around that? But that's the kind of thing that you run into.
I think if you,
need to define it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not pushing to define it, it's just something that's sitting there that's,
mhm.
Yeah, I'm designated as the chief personnel officer, so I think ultimately, at some point,
Yeah,
that
that's
role
fine.
or
As long as-
comes into effect.
as long as we have when we get a request, we know what to do with it.
If you wanted to, I think we could easily include a sentence here at the beginning of the last paragraph that requests for accommodation should be, submitted through the Department of Human Resources or through the county administrator's office. If you think it's necessary, that would be my recommendation.
I think outlining where requests be submitted for processing makes a whole, that's probably a good.
Well, I hate to get ourselves down to a processing thing, and we screw up the processing. Becomes the issue instead of the accommodation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually. I don't know why I said actually. I think that's a good point.
Thank you.
And it comes from somebody who probably has a lot of experience dealing with those kinds of situations in a former career.
Several former careers.
Yes.
Any other questions on this policy? No? Next one, recruitment and selection. Again, this policy was decades old, and we went through, updated some of the language, modernized it, just made it more consistent and aligned it with current practice. So there weren't a lot of changes regarding internal recruitment. External recruitment, we removed the requirement for positions to be advertised in the newspaper of wider circulation for longer periods of time, just some of the antiquated language. We also removed the requirement for the county administrator to maintain an open applicants file where individuals could submit an application for a position that is not open at the time, and the county administrator's office had to maintain it for a certain amount of time. We haven't been doing that for some time, so we just removed it to align with practice. And updated certain classes. We had already updated our classes that we could not discriminate against as part of the EEO policy. So we updated the same in our selection policy to align, which included adding things like marital status and veteran status and genetics, and so now that aligns with the state and with our EEO policy.
We'll need a DNA test, right?
No,
Is
no, we're not
there-
allowed to DNA test candidates.
A question, with this new policy, does that remove the ability of certain departments to not allow people to reapply for a specified time period?
I am not aware of a requirement in our policy regarding reapplication.
As I stated, does that take away the ability of certain departments to to prevent people from reapplying for a set amount of time? I'm
Not,
hoping the
not to
answer
my
is-
knowledge, no.
Okay, so in other words, how are you going to track if someone has applied? You're not required to maintain a list, an open list. I don't agree with the policy that has been in place, and I'm wondering if this will take care of that, is what I'm actually looking to find out.
What I proposed removing here is, you know, we may not have a job opening at all, and someone could come in with a blank application with their contact information on it and just turn it in.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking, and they're not the department, but I'll use them as an example.
Okay,
Fire and Rescue has someone come in, apply, take the tests. They don't pass the test. They have within their own department, you cannot reapply for 6 months. I don't believe that that is a legal leg to stand on. I don't know though. Is that
part of, their SOGs? Maybe an individual departmental policy, but
right?
to my knowledge, it's not part of our personnel policy manual.
Okay, and I guess that's what I'm getting at, is are we allowing departments to operate independently of the general county or not?
You know,
Okay.
this kinda, I think, goes back to, I don't wanna drag Lee into this, but I think this is part of Lee's point earlier. You know, the more rules and regulations you get, then the more things you can trip up on. And it seems to me there are clear reasons why a department would have a 6-month waiting period. And that doesn't, to me, that has nothing to do with, I can't imagine why that wouldn't be legal, because you're not applying it against any particular group of people except for people who applied for a position. So I don't,
Yeah, no, it's legal. We actually have we don't even have legal requirements to advertise jobs. I mean, it's only the state constitutional officers that have to do that. So we have pretty broad discretion on how we manage our personnel.
I think Mr. Crozier's question is not maybe so much about
It's about
the
consistency.
right. Are there policies that,
consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds.
I guess I'm a hobgoblin.
I'm trying to work through, and maybe we can have an offline conversation.
I think the problem is we can't, just like in our zoning ordinance, we can't address every possible situation that comes along. And I would rather, in these gray areas, I'd rather just not have a policy than to put a policy in that just creates more problems.
I think if somebody applies for a job and they're not successful as a successful candidate, and then reapplies for another position in that department, or the same job if there are multiple jobs, there probably is a reason why they weren't qualified the first time around, and so,
Yeah, we'll
yeah.
talk off.
Okay, I'm thinking it through, but I'd love to talk about it. Yeah.
Next one, Allison?
okay, so we removed the open applicant file, updated some language, and just aligned the policy with current practice. We had in our recruitment and selection the pre-employment physical examination, and the criminal history background check. One of the things that prompted revisions to this policy is that social services employees are also required to be screened through the Virginia Child Abuse and Neglect Central Registry to make sure that prior to their employment, they have not had child abuse or adult abuse accusations or allegations made against them. So in addition to the Virginia State Police criminal background check that we do, they are required to go through the central registry. While we were adding the central registry language, we also included that there are certain positions that have to be fingerprinted as a condition of employment, which was not previously included in our policy. We also had a separate drug and alcohol use policy. That was the only policy that referenced our pre-employment drug screening. And we just added a section in there to kind of cover everything from medical examination to criminal history background check to drug screening all in one place. We did not change that policy. We just put a reference to that policy in our recruitment and selection process so that everything is kind of lumped together. And that's it for that policy. Any questions? Okay. Next one is personnel records. This is a brand new policy that was drafted. And what it does is defines what should be included in personnel records at a minimum, and defines who will maintain them, and also establishes the county's commitment to follow the Library of Virginia records management policies, which, you know, the state maintains and we're committing to following, and it gives us guidance on, you know, maintenance of anything from applications to background checks to salary actions. We can go to those record and disposition schedules and determine how long we need to keep paperwork. That is largely seen as a universal schedule for local and state agencies, so it's pretty much an industry standard on maintaining personnel records. And we also define employee and third-party access to their personnel files, which has not previously been included in our policy manual.
The provisions of the code that authorize third-party access, is that mostly courts and law enforcement?
They were mainly like salary information, title information. There was a very limited list in the code of what we can provide to a third party. You know, even the newspaper, like if they wanted to do a FOIA request for that information, it could be considered part of personnel records, but we couldn't under FOIA withhold that information. So what we're saying under the third party access is that under those provisions, there is certain information that we can give out to a requester without having employee permission. So I could, you know, if someone called, I could give, you know,
Like
the
what
title and a salary, and I think
By name for the individual then, the title and the salary?
typically when our
That's
FOIA
FOIA-able.
requests are
Yeah.
by
That's
name.
FOIA-able.
Okay, all right.
So what we're saying is we're gonna follow state code, which defines employees having access to their information and then what information we can give out without the employee's permission. And it doesn't include things like medical records and anything that would be protected by HIPAA. Any other questions there?
The only question I had is, that if you look at the item B, maintenance personnel records, it reads as if they're paper copies of all these things. Are we taking any position on electronic versions of records? Or is that assumed to be it? I'm thinking that as we move beyond paper on some of these things, are we committing to do something that we really
So
shouldn't be?
we are currently following the, even without this policy, following the Library of Virginia record and disposition schedules. And many items that are considered to be part of a personnel record have like a 50-year retention. They're in paper format right now. It is the format that the auditors use when they're looking at things, when we have a VRS audit or a, you know, workers' comp audit or anything. All of that is in paper format right now. I think at some point the Library of Virginia schedules will start sharing more information on electronic retention and disposition.
Okay, I,
With a 50-year timeline, now, you may not be able to open the stuff that you put in
Right.
49 years ago.
Yeah. Probationary period, we updated some of the language there. And what we were mainly trying to accomplish, at the time of deviation, when social services comes under our policy manual, they currently have a 12-month probationary period. The county policy is a 6-month probationary period. So we took a look at this policy, to just modernize some of the language and again, align it with current practice. As part of the deviation, we've also developed a way, to address discrepancies in the length of a probationary period when an employee, comes over to the county, as part of the deviation. And there's a section, subsection D, compensation following probationary period. We added that. These are, both of these paragraphs represent current practice. We do not award wage adjustments to probationary employees until they successfully complete their probationary period. So this just gives us, something to point to in the policy. It's current practice. It will now become policy. And additionally, allowing a department director or constitutional officer to recommend to the county administrator, who would have the ultimate determination, to consider as a condition of employment whether or not an employee will receive additional compensation at completion of their probationary period. For example, you may, a department director may recommend bringing someone in at $50,000 while they're on probation, and then at the successful completion of probation, they would be offered maybe a $3,000 increase or something.
Or 3% or 5%
right.
increase as an incentive.
I have a question regarding that. Provided a performance evaluation is done, we can see justification for permanent employment, justification for a raise. But if you should do it, how are you documenting an employee's performance if an evaluation is not done? I don't understand why we went from will to should.
as opposed to shall.
Right, the only way, and once again, I'll go to the public safety side of it. They may change supervisors. They may have one supervisor, then they get put on a different shift and have another supervisor. When you don't have an evaluation, it becomes a very subjective matter for someone to evaluate someone.
Or to defend in court.
Or to defend in court. Whereas when you have the paper trail of evaluations, it's easier for supervisors to look back on past performance of employees and rate them accordingly, as well as for disciplinary reasons, if you want to let somebody go after they're past their probationary, well, you just weren't doing what you should have been doing. Well, no one has ever told me what I should be doing,
Other than verbally.
and verbally, even on a verbal discipline, it has to be
It
documented.
should be documented.
Right, so it concerns me. Is this another,
Well, no,
No.
maybe ask the county attorney. I think we were working through some of this in the wills and shoulds and shalls. Tom, do you have any, if we went back to a will where there's an affirmative requirement on behalf of the supervisor to do a 3 and a 6 month?
well, it's not just the 3 and the 6 month, it's as you go through an annual evaluation,
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'm always concerned about is the bozo that everybody agrees is a bozo. And yet, they go, well, I haven't had my evaluation, I'm grieving because you violated the policy and didn't get me, and it was basically such a bozo, we actually didn't get around to it. That's the danger, or the other side of the other danger that I've seen on my end is supervisors, good, when really they're not.
Right.
And then when we terminate, they pull out 7 years of good evaluations that in fact were, somebody
Seen a
just
lot of that.
checked a bunch of boxes. So there's
There's
downsides.
pros and cons either way, but I'm,
I think
So
that was the
this is so-
recommendation from will to should, again, removing any implied promise
Right,
to
and that's,
an employee.
I think I might have done that, Will, to should.
Yes.
and
It would
there's
seem,
one-
it would
there's one
seem
more
that this,
thing with this.
the will puts us back into the procedural,
Yeah, that was my change.
Okay,
the
well,
will
there's
to should.
something else, and I don't know if this has been changed or not. In the previous, policies and procedures, layoffs are determined by those. Not just by your time serving, but by the evaluation.
That's by your evaluation.
So, just something to.
The reason
to
I
look
changed,
at.
the reason I changed it to should is just so it wouldn't, the procedure wouldn't be used against me if I'm in a grievance case or an
Right.
employment discrimination case.
So is that something we can look at further?
And I'm coming around to Tom's thinking, given some of the some of the situations we found ourselves in. I could probably represent to the board that the practice will be to do evaluations, but if we find ourselves in a situation where we have an evaluation that really wasn't a fair evaluation, or we're missing an evaluation, we have to take performance action, this doesn't trip us up. But the practice would be that we would have these evaluations. And in fact, I think part now, and we're moving into a different world in
I
human
understand.
resources administration now that Allison's. So I think having somebody that's responsible to receive these evaluations in order for somebody to be coming off probationary period, we now have a check to make sure that those evaluations
Yeah, I
have
mean,
been done.
if you back up a little bit, why have a probationary period at all if you're not going to, at the end of that period,
Release.
make an explicit determination about whether or not that person is, I mean, if you don't do that, you don't need the probationary period.
I will say that the 3-month and 6-month probationary period evaluations, everyone is most diligent to get those two done for that reason. It is the annual evaluations where we may be a bit more challenged.
Just as a comment, I'd like the staff to look at that more thoroughly to see where we need to be at.
Yeah, is this a matter we need to pick up at a later discussion?
Well, we need to-
Probationary period in general,
Well,
or
no,
This document.
these policies, yeah.
Well, we've got to have,
I think we have 2 left.
yeah, we had
2 minutes.
Can you do them in 2 minutes?
Yes, do you have any other questions on probationary period? Next, classification plan and salary structure. Most of that was modernizing wording and updating it to current practice. And simply adding that the active position classification list will be maintained as part of the annual budget document versus providing a copy in every single employee handbook. And position reclassification and various salary actions. The county administrator, it's always been at that position's discretion to determine when a change in someone's employment status would result in a salary action. And what the state wanted, instead of seeing it just in our written narrative, they wanted to point to somewhere in our policy that gives the county administrator the discretion to do that. So reclassification, I know you all are familiar with that because we've had some of those recently. We have a definition for what we consider a reclassification, and then again, at the discretion of the county administrator, determining the effect on the employee's salary. And we have descriptions there for what that may look like. We also have implemented subsection B for interim or acting assignments. We now have a definition for an interim assignment, a definition for an acting assignment, and then the potential effects on an employee's salary as part of one of those assignments. Something that we have never had in our policy before on the county side is competitive pay offers. That is something that is recognized by the State Department of Social Services in the compensation plan that the local agencies have to adopt. And what we've done by adding it in this policy is just recognized that the county administrator can consider a competitive pay offer, but it doesn't guarantee an effect on the salary. And any change to the salary has to be in line with the minimum, mid, and maximum salary ranges that the board has established, and should be constrained by what you all have adopted in the budget and the competitive market.
And I'll just put this in there one more time. In order to retain an employee who is highly skilled and performing at a high level, if you don't have an evaluation, how do you know they're performing at a high level?
Yes, sir.
To me, it just begs for that these be done on a regular basis, and it can still be worded well, but if we don't do them on a regular basis, it's just a lot of pitfalls.
And last policy is regarding bereavement leave. We expanded the definition of immediate family member by including members of a family that may be, a stepchild, a step-parent, as well as in-laws, which is in line with the state's policy. So it does slightly expand our immediate family member definition. And we also added a section at the state's request where we recognize there are times where an employee may need to exceed the 24 hours of paid bereavement leave offered by the county. And they may do so, but it will be charged to their annual leave, comp time, or paid time off in accordance with the requirements of those specific policies. Any questions on that policy?
Just question, 24 hours, that is 24 working hours, is that correct?
Yes. Right. If an employee's not scheduled to be at work during that time, they wouldn't.
That's fine, I just wanted to make sure that we defined that 24 hours.
Okay,
That's a lot of work.
yeah.
It was. Tom helped me, Glenda, Crystal and Sherry at Social Services, Connie, Karen. It's been a team effort. Although I'm the one presenting it, I do want to make sure that everyone knows they were an essential part of it as well, so.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in order for us to continue with our deviation application for the State Department of Social Services, you would need to adopt these revisions.
And I don't think I noted any changes.
Other than the will or thing that we, will or shall we need to talk about.
Yes, and I do have things on the
But I would
to-do
move that
list
we
for sure.
would adopt it.
Okay, is there a second?
Go ahead, sir. I'll second.
Any more discussion?
Just that, I would hope that we do go back and revisit this after adoption to tweak anything that we need to.
Right, yeah, it should be always open for review as we have situations occur, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's do a roll call, please.
Mr. Frame?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Crozier?
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin?
Aye.
And Mr. White?
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, and team.
Yes, thank
But it
you.
was a lot of work. When I saw that, it's a lot to do.
That's all right.
Yeah, it was a lot of red. Okay, let's call a meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Have an agenda, any changes or additions? I'm not aware of any.
Yes, sir.
Anyone have any? Okay,
Move to approve.
okay. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Special presentations and appearances. Service awards.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, as you make your way over. We have a number of county employees that are realizing their service awards. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm pleased to identify or bring forward Roger Wilson, who's receiving a 15-year service award as a firefighter medic with the Department of Fire and EMS.
Come on up. Congratulations, and thank you. Here's the painful part. But smile like you enjoy it. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Noah Madden, a 10-year service award, firefighter medic.
Congratulations, and thank you. 10 years.
Next, we have Jacob Slaughter, a 5-year service award, Orange County Office on Youth Child Care Teacher Assistant.
Thank you.
Next, Michelle Purcell, a 5-year service award, Youth Services Librarian. And last, Teresa Burris, 25-year service award, evidence clerk.
Amazing. 25 years. That's a special thank you. Congratulations.
Not able to attend today is Karen Spencer. She will be receiving a 10-year service award, Orange Office on Youth Child Care Teacher. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the service awards for today.
Okay. Business Spotlight. It's Menendez, manager of La Naranja. How'd you pick the name, the orange, being an orange?
Yeah, it's for the,
It's not a trick question.
Yeah, everyone asks what it means, la naranja, but it's so easy. It's just the orange. Yeah, and it's hard to pronounce it because for English you can say la naranja, but in real Spanish is la naranja. So that is the reason it's a little hard. But okay. So hello, good evening. My name is Ari Mendez. I'm the administrative manager of La Naranja Mexican restaurant. And it's a pleasure me be here with you today to talk about and introduce you La Naranja Mexican restaurant. What is La Naranja? La Naranja translates to the orange. We opened our doors to the public on March 23rd, this present year, on 182 Bird Street, Orange, Virginia. Efrain and Karen Gallardo are a young couple born here in the United States, but with a Mexican ethnic background. Both come from families that own Mexican restaurants here in the state of Virginia and Ohio. They therefore carry the Mexican cuisine in their blood. It has always been this young couple's dream to start their own Mexican restaurant, and they choose the town Orange for achieve this dream and making happy people with the Mexican cuisine. You may ask, what makes us different? We are a new concept of traditional Mexican food and Tex-Mex food. We have a seating capacity of 150 people and a full bar and outside seating where you can enjoy our delicious food in the spring, fall, or summer. We also offer catering for all your special events needs. In our menu, you can find a large variety of different option foods like vegetarian, chicken, steak, pork, seafood, and Tex-Mex meal. All our meals are cooking with the best French ingredients. We invite everyone to come in and enjoy our food and of course the margaritas and make it yourself feel like home. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I've eaten there several times. It's very good.
Okay, presentation from Virginia Recreation and Park Association. Mr. Stutz.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Jim Stutz, the Virginia Recreation and Park Society. I had the pleasure of being here 2 years ago. I'm back again to brag on your award-winning Parks and Rec Department. Just a month ago, we had our annual convention down in Henrico, and we have a very competitive awards program. It's held at our banquet, and it's a highlight of our conference. This year, we had over 114 applications in 14 categories, and Orange County went home with 2 awards. And I asked Tim to come up so I can represent these to you. These were presented in front of his peers. It's a very competitive program. As I mentioned, we have a committee that's juried, that looks at the awards and spend probably 2 full days making decisions on what awards to give. And it's interesting, the awards here are for some pretty creative things. One is for the most innovative marketing piece. It's a Tacky Lights sweatshirt, and I understand that Tim was trying to start a Tacky Lights tour, and how do you have a Tacky Lights tour without a Tacky Lights sweatshirt? So the photographs that were used with the press are pretty descriptive, so I would encourage you to take a look at the photographs. But I would like to represent this award to Tim and his staff, the Tacky Lights sweatshirt for the most innovative marketing piece. And there's a second award that they got. This was the Snapshot Moment. It's a new award, and let your imagination be your guide, but this happened to be for a very successful morale building program. It was the office costume contest. And again, you need to see the photographs that accompany the awards. If you can envision employees from landfill dressed as Barbie and Ken, and from there you can go. But the committee looked at this and judged against all of the 110 park and rec departments in the state and decided that this was a very, very innovative and very successful program. So this is for the Snapshot Moment Office Costume Contest. So again, congratulations to you guys. All right. Just want you all to know how good your rec department is. It's getting notice from his peers across the state, and I'm very proud to be back, and good job. Thank you so much for letting me be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do know.
Yes.
Okay, next is our VDOT quarterly update. Mr. Saunders.
Yes, sir. Chairman White, members of the board, good evening. My name is Alan Saunders with the Virginia Department of Transportation. I'm going to quickly review the latest monthly report, page by page, and offer some highlights, and then have some time at the end to answer any questions you may have. From page 1 of your December monthly report, I'll quickly go through some of our active projects. Route 608, thankfully that's complete. We have some minor punch list items, so drainage items to update as conditions permitting. We'll correct those, and then that route will be complete. Any of the routes that we've completed, I do want to note that they'll also be incorporated into our resurfacing schedule next year to get another lift of surface treatment on top of the surface that we've got there. Route 603, That route is very wet, so we've begun to stockpile stone at the area headquarters. If any of the residents along 603 can go by the area headquarters in Rhodesville, there's a large sign that says Route 603 on a stockpile of stone that's about 40 feet high and 70 yards long. So we're stockpiling stone, and as soon as we can get out there, we are preparing to put the remaining subgrade down and hard surface that as soon as conditions permit.
If I might interrupt you just for a second, Route 606, Catharpin Road, Mr. Crozier cannot claim that road. He has been for a long
I
time.
tried to give it away to you.
That's actually a
They
District
ignored
2
it.
road, so I just want to make sure that the District 2 folks don't feel left out there.
For Route 3 and 20, that's really 4 projects that's going on concurrently. The Louisa Residency is responsible for the grade and drainage improvements. The signal work is going to continue. Once that's complete, we'll pick the grading and drainage work back up and then pave that as soon as conditions will permit. At Route 602, we have design and environmental approvals for that, and as soon as we wrap up Route 603, the first eastern section of Route 602 will be next as soon as we complete Indiantown. From page 2 of your monthly report, West Wind Drive work began yesterday, and we'll continue on that as conditions permit over the winter. We're gonna maintain that over the winter until we can hard surface it. So we'll stage traffic, add the drainage improvements. We've got several cross pipes that we have to replace along that route, and then we'll maintain that over the winter until we can hard surface it. Battlefield Farms paving project, we're preparing contract documents to advertise for bids. Initially, we had planned to do that this fall, and our plant mix contractor has fallen behind in their work, and this was on the end of their work, and now conditions are too cold to plant mix. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna prepare a contract for the paving section on Route 617, 627, and 701 from Battlefield Farms to 522. And we met with Battlefield Farms about a month ago just to convey our schedule and make sure that we schedule our work in a way that doesn't influence their operations, and we'll keep them engaged as we advance that project. Route 630, Matthews Mill, the residents will see us. We've got our bridge crews are going to come back out on the project. We've amended our environmental permit to address some safety concerns at the bridge structure. And as conditions permit, we're gonna have those guys out there over the next 2 months fixing that. The Route 20, 231 roundabout, that's advancing on schedule. Route 601, we're looking forward to beginning preliminary engineering on our smart scale project in the spring, as soon as we can get started on that. The resurfacing projects, we have 63 of 64 routes are complete. We've got some minor punch list items on the last route out at Barbersville, and then our resurfacing work will be complete for 2018. We've already begun to compile and advertise for bids work for 2019, and as soon as we have that route list together, we'll send that to you so that you can vet out the material type in the route list and share that with your constituents.
You more than doubled the amount of money spent on resurfacing this last year.
We did. We did.
Trend that'll continue?
We hope. We hope. We're still waiting to see what our final 2019 allocations are, but the tack that we've taken to shift from plant mix to resurfacing has allowed us to really tackle on. It costs 10 times as much to plant mix as resurface, so we've gotten almost over 70 miles this year in the county. So we'll continue that trend in targeting which routes we apply what surface treatment until we get all of them done, and then we'll repeat. So slowly get our surface conditions up. From page 3, I do want to note, in traffic engineering, we listed the Route 3 arterial preservation plan quarter study in the traffic engineering, even though that's a meld between traffic and planning. We received the final draft from VDOT's consultant. I'm scheduled to review that with Cabina, and then we'll route that back to the county. I don't expect to see any surprises, but we want to make sure that it includes all of your comments before we route that back to you. The Route 651 Terry's Run Road, Fraser's Landing, we did a traffic speed study on that. It's currently unposted. The speed study is complete, and the traffic engineering section recommends reducing that to 25 miles an hour. The Tisdale Road, we recommend a 35 mile an hour speed limit. The signs for that, for those 2 routes, were replaced last week. On page 4, the Route 641, 639 speed study, that too recommended a reduction to 35 miles an hour, and those signs, your county report indicates that the installation is scheduled, but I think those signs are up. I think they got those up last week as well. Down in our county safety and operational improvements, we've got Opticon devices that we're spreading across intersections, the 3 and 20, the 20 and 522. Those are scheduled, and as soon, now that the signal work's ongoing in 3 and 20, when they put the new signals up, it's gonna include Opticon, and we'll coordinate that with the chiefs to make sure their gear is configured accordingly. The Route 3 and 708, if you've noticed the new signal when you're traveling east on Route 3, it's across on the other side, and you can pick that up about 1,000 feet before the intersection, which has been a huge safety improvement. And you may have noticed too, we've been placing back plates across the entire county at the signals to help, just really help increase their visibility. The 650 and 522, we upgraded the flashing beacon last week. We received some complaints about the sign quality, so that was a new $32,000 sign that we put up there. So it is very visible from about half mile away, so we're glad to have that safety improvement up. Then on page 5, the one thing that I did want to note, we've got several routes under review as far as land use. And VDOT's land use section has created a checklist for secondary street acceptance that they posted on our website. And that's something that you can share with your constituents so that they know what the process is for getting their route into VDOT's secondary system. Before it was a little general, now they've got a step-by-step instruction and checklist to show what their requirements are. And gentlemen, that's all I have for you this evening. Are there any questions that I can answer?
The repaving has been finished on Route 20, where it hits 33. Are you going to be replacing the rumble strips on Route 20?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
We sure are. In any of the sections where you may see gaps in rumble strips, that's because we're going to resurface over the next 2 years. So we didn't pay for the rumble strips just to mill them up. So as we resurface additional segments, we'll add the rumble strips back to have as many. The goal is to have rumble strips on 100% of our primaries in the Culpeper District because we've seen such a huge impact, up to 90–95% crash reduction for those. So they've had a huge safety impact for those.
You were talking about one time putting some, a light in the intersection of Lake of the Woods entrance and 522 with the eastbound left turn lane. You're gonna put it in the median across the street from that. You can't see the light overhead very well. And you were talking about a median, is that anywhere in the
No, sir.
pipeline?
Not yet.
Okay,
Not yet.
all right.
We're going to wait to see what the recommendations are of the arterial management plan would
Okay,
recommend
all
as
right.
far as intersection improvements
That's fine.
there. And in the end, if we don't have anything in the midterm, then we may have another HSIP project at that intersection
Okay,
to improve
all right.
the signals altogether.
You say you're going for 100% rumble strips on all primary roads?
We are, yes, sir.
Okay.
Signaled and unsignaled, or just
Signaled and unsignaled.
both? Okay.
Okay, and that really gets that big a reduction in crashes.
The rumble strips have shown to be 90–95% reduction in head-on crashes, which is our highest fatality type crash. And especially with the uptick in, the statistics are really daunting. Over the last 5 years, we've had almost 170,000 crashes related to distracted driving, almost 1,000 fatalities. Just last year alone, over 200 fatalities related to distracted driving. And it really is in long straight stretches in areas where somebody can easily glance down at their phone. And these rumble strips have been proven to be, especially for the money, provide the highest return on investment relative to safety and really reducing those distracted driving. So thankfully, our district traffic engineer in the Culpeper District across the state, we're at the forefront in really deploying that safety technology. And we're doing that in as many locations as we can. We're trying to be sensitive to residential areas, and we've got some alternate technology like the mumble strips that don't provide as much noise but still give feedback to the driver that will deploy selectively in areas where we may be concerned about the noise. But we're trying to put those in everywhere that we can.
Thank you.
Alan,
Sir.
I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Are you talking about the center and side rumble strips?
Both. Center, sometimes we call them
I
rumble
was
strips.
referring to the ones that go across the lane.
At the intersection.
Oh, like a pavement marking type or something that's milled into the pavement.
Well,
That's-
what's been used is like they put strips of tape and build
Yes,
it
sir.
up there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
my fault.
Perpendicular to the
Correct.
gravel.
It's
Yes,
really
sir.
because of the stop,
Hey,
sort
stop
of
flaunting your education, using words like perpendicular.
Those will be replaced.
Those will be replaced
sir.
on that, or 20 Ts into 33?
They will.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's what I was referring to, but then as you were
Yes, sir.
talking, I realized
I was
there are the
thinking,
milled ones that are popping up everywhere, and they work. I mean, you can't ignore it.
Oh, especially on the edge.
Yeah.
They do. Yes, sir, those will be replaced in kind.
Okay.
Got your speed sign yet?
We're not gonna give up until we get those radar feedback signs. They're still in procurement, and I never thought that it would take us so long to get something so simple. But we're still in procurement at a state level, and we've requested across our entire district, each of the 3 resident engineers have requested radar feedback signs, and they're still in procurement. So as soon as we get them, we're gonna follow up with the county and the sheriff's department and have a prioritized list of the locations that you want them, and we'll put them place by place by place by place, and then rotate them as conditions warrant. But we can't wait to get them. Across our 3 counties, we're looking forward to it, at least for the Louisa residency. And we are. Now, I never thought it could be, it could go out and buy a $300,000 piece of equipment, that takes us about 24 months, but we've got them over time. And then we've got a $1,300 radar feedback sign that's been giving us so much trouble, so that's sort of our own worst enemy, trying to get those things.
Appreciate all the great work. I do have one road that I went down today, and it's Old Office Road, and it's the 3rd segment. Goes from, across 692 up to, Aerojet.
Right.
There's a section there that, it's mud. They put a load of gravel, but that deep, it's horrible. So if you get some crews out to throw some boulders in it or something. I don't know what you're gonna do with it.
We will, we are targeting our gravel roads from the 300 miles we maintain in Culpeper, all starting coming down, we're trying to hit all of them because they've just fallen to pieces.
There's other parts that are bad. This is.
Awful.
I think Crystal could tell you that it's horrible. It's,
Well, we'll follow up with Greg and.
in fact,
sure
it's
we
right
talk
in
about
front of Ray's house. Is
Okay.
literally where it's at. So. Thank you, Alan.
The culvert that was replaced, I guess for the second time on Lahore Road just before 522, I've gotten a couple of calls about the dip that's there, and actually drove it myself, I guess it was last Wednesday night. Is there a plan to go back and take that fairly severe dip and bump out of that? Or, I mean, are they finished, or is there an awareness of that and plan to do something about it? If not, I'm making you aware of it.
Thank you.
You know the one I'm talking about, they replaced it back, I think it was in the summer, and then maybe within the last month, had to do it again for some reason, I'm not sure. Or maybe there was one that was beside it, I don't know that it was exactly the same one, but if you're headed, I guess that would be east on Lahore, half a mile before 522, you'll know it. Matter of fact, there's a sign there that says dip. And boy, are they not kidding.
Okay, so that traffic calming feature is not wanted.
It is a traffic calming feature, but it's usually too late.
Yes, sir, I'll go home that way and make sure that conditions noted.
Let me know what you think.
If he's got a sign out there, then it's scheduled to be repaired.
I assumed it was, but I didn't have a good answer.
But I still wanna know where it's at. I do. I haven't been through that section of 629 in the last few days, but I'll check that out and see if Mr. Snow can push that up on the priority
Well, at
list.
least as of last Wednesday evening, it was still
Okay.
Dipping.
a dip. Okay, anything else for Alan? All right. Thank you. We know you're juggling lots of projects and activities. We appreciate it.
Oh, y'all are worth it. It's a great community to serve. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thanks. Okay, consent agenda. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. New business, cooperative contract for purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus. Ms. Stephanie. Spending money again, I see.
Well, more expensive.
Somebody else is.
We're spending it, you're making sure he gets the best price.
Yeah, that sounds like a good team.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. I'm joined here this evening with Amanda Amos. She's our new procurement coordinator who started on November 18th. Just wanted to have this opportunity to introduce her to you. You'll be seeing a little bit more of her in the next coming months. She actually helped Chief Morton and I put together this contract. So I wanted her to be part of this presentation. As you're aware, in September, Chief Mort presented the $846,000 grant from the Assistance to Firefighters Fund for the SCBA purchase. Since that time, he has spearheaded a committee comprised of county employees and volunteers from the Volunteer Fire Chiefs Association to review products and come together for what they feel is the best option, which is at this time Scott AirPack X3 Pro. We were able to locate these devices on a contract that was procured through Prince William County. It has very favorable pricing. Honestly, probably better pricing than we could have done if we went out to bid. It was really excellent pricing. And we are here tonight to ask for the execution of that contract with that current pricing as presented to us a month ago.
Okay,
And funding is in project C-1067.
all right. Any questions?
No, I'd just like to compliment everybody involved in this. Like she said, I don't think you could go out and contract. I think Prince William will be jealous of what we got writing on their contract. It was substantial savings.
Great effort by the selection committee that, again, was composed of county staff and volunteers. They did an excellent job.
Great.
And if I understand that these air packs are also outfitted with some additional features that wouldn't have otherwise been part of it, so we were able to.
Yeah, there's 132 and it includes those plus accessories.
Correct. There's a bunch of additional safety features.
What was that
Chief,
again?
Chief and I had talked about it.
132 and then accessories and additional safety features, like Chief Mort said. It was a really great offer.
Good. All right, anyone want to make a motion?
So moved. Okay, I'll second it.
All right, moved and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you.
all.
Welcome to your new position, Amanda.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And we have no old business, new business, the update on Youth Commission and Youth Council. We've been wondering and asked for some help understanding that. So Alicia,
Good
tell
evening.
us.
So before you have a memo, I was asked to put together some information on our youth commission and our council. We do have a lot of people that get the two confused. Our commission is our adults, our council is our children, or our students. They don't like to be called children. So the youth commission was established in 1980, as the memo says. I've listed some of their activities that they support our office doing. And at this time, they are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We have a member for each district and 5 at-large positions. The Youth Council are the kiddos that you guys approve once a year in grades 8 through 12. They are interviewed by their peers. I sit in on those interviews just to make sure everything's going well. And then we make a proposal to you on the children, the students to be on the council. We can have up to 30 students on the council. 25 regulars and 5 alternates. And again, have listed some of the activities that they do. This is, by no means all inclusive. So, wanted to just answer any questions you might have about either group.
Was the youth council, was that created at the same time as the youth commission?
I believe it was shortly after. I've not been able to find a date on that.
Okay.
And I searched through a lot of different things. And the Youth Commission used to be the governing body of the Office on Youth. They are who oversaw my predecessor, Ruth Ann Paisley, with all the policies and procedures, and then we transitioned to under all of the county policies and procedures. So at this time, they're more of an advisory board than they are a governing body.
Yeah, well, I brought it all up because the difficulty in trying to find people, and hopefully that you could find people that
We have
want to
6
be involved.
vacancies out of the 10 right this second.
Yes, I know.
And in talking to the membership, we had our meeting a couple of weeks ago. We meet every other month, just to make it easier on some of the members who are involved in a lot of other things. And one of their suggestions was to make our minimum 5, 1 from each district, and then up to 10, so that we're not committed to having all the time 10. That was their suggestion. They would be willing to help recruit. I gave them one of the scenarios that, we may pick our own peers for the commission. I would still like for the council to be appointed by you guys. I think that's a great honor for the kids. So we've talked about many different scenarios of how we could improve. And we really would like to improve. We have the same members over and over who are coming. And it's not all 4 of the 4 who are on the list.
Is this something you would like to have further conversations with the existing commission members and come and make some recommendations of changes, or what are the next steps?
They're open to any changes. Again, we discussed it at our last meeting with the, two of the 4 members were there. One was traveling, the other member said they would be there and never showed up. That's been a regular occurrence for this particular member. We've been in contact. So the current members, they are open to changes, making suggestions. Again, theirs was have a minimum of 1 person. They feel it's important to have a person from each district so that the whole county is represented, but not saying we have to have 10 members to be a full commission either. So they're willing to make any changes, and if you guys have recommendations for that, they're willing to listen.
Why don't we, I would suggest going to a, you know, 1 member from each district, and then if there are other people interested, you know, we can add up to an additional 5, but not have the vacancies appearing on our packet every month.
It looks bad.
Yeah, so.
I think that's an excellent idea to start off that way.
And we could look at the current members. A couple of our members, 2 of the members are labeled in a district. The other 2 are at-larges, but we could put them over to one of the districts. So that would leave one of our districts open right now. And they're willing to go that route to finish out those terms. So that would be our suggestion to start right away with.
Which district would leave open?
Right now, I think it is on your packet. I did not have that. I'm so sorry. I know it's 5. We have 1 in Stacy Burleson. Who has Stacy Burleson? Mr. White's
Yeah,
your
that's
district's
2,
covered.
yeah.
So Mr. Johnson and Mr. White's districts are covered.
Yeah, we're not.
Okay, no, well, I'm the one that's gotta find somebody.
We have
But I really
someone,
like your
one of the at-larges is District 5.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then
So who
Ruth
is
Ann
it?
Paisley, I believe is yours.
Yeah.
She is our other member, so we could plop her into yours.
So who doesn't have one? You?
I
Mr.
don't have
Crozier.
one. However, I can get some of my constituents to look for people since they have school-age children, right?
Yeah, I mean, as the economy moves where everybody is not around, it's become virtually impossible to find.
And that's one reason why we went to every other month meeting as well. And that has worked for most of the members that we have.
Why don't, make a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I think the bylaws are adopted by the commission, correct?
And approved by the
By the
board, if I
board.
remember
Approved by the
correctly.
board.
As
And-
well as the youth council.
As well as the youth council. Why don't we go back and refresh the bylaws and bring those back to the board to reflect a 5-member commission with 1 representatives from each district, and that the commission then could have join them interested individuals up to no more than 10 or pick some ceiling number. That way they can kind of be the person to recruit others who then could serve and maybe fill in the slots. But we bring all this back as kind of a bylaw update refresh.
I have one that I can give to serve, so.
So does that sound doable, gentlemen?
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Okay,
That works.
all right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the update and the information. Okay. Healthy Families Program requests. Ms. Hale.
Good evening. Appreciate
Good
that.
evening.
Good evening, yes.
Good evening, thank you.
We did hear you.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here, bringing before you tonight a request for Healthy Families Program. This program, you may recall, was in our community for over 20 years until recently, a little over a year ago. It was facilitated by Virginia Department of Health. They pretty much suspended the program and backed out. And then
You know why?
I think there were a variety of reasons. I did speak through email with Dr. Karchner, and he mentioned several things to include a change in administration, some staffing issues, and I think he was uncomfortable with VDS and a lot of different hands in the pot and a lot of administrative work that they were doing, which is where Skyline CAP comes into play. Skyline CAP has offered to take on that role for us.
Were they pulled out by the state, or was this just?
No,
a local?
VDH, I think it was sort of a consensus. They met with BDSS and pretty much
Okay,
just said,
all
we're
right.
not taking it anymore, yeah. So, as far as our responsibility, Skyline Cap has offered to take on that whole piece of it, and has requested that Orange DSS help facilitate by basically referring clients, educating clients, helping to screen clients, and then passing them on to Skyline Cap for actual administration of the program. As a condition of this partnership, Skyline Cap has requested an in-kind contribution, which is just that, a staff member working approximately 5 hours a week, just to make sure folks are aware of the program and that we're referring clients to the program. Historically, as confirmed by Ms. Bradley, there has been an existing allocation, budget allocation for $5,000 that has remained on the books, which we will not need this year, so the county can absorb that for other priorities. At the conclusion of this fiscal year, Skyline Cap and Orange DSS, myself and the worker, will meet to discuss outcomes and if we want to continue with the program. At that point, if we decide to continue, there may be a reevaluation of what our contribution will be. But for this year, the remainder of the year, it will just be an in-kind contribution.
So the visitation would actually be done by the Skyline Cap
Correct.
staff?
Correct, and this will be shared with Madison. The worker, the Skyline Cap worker will be shared with Madison. There is a potential if the program were to grow and be very successful, which I hope it would be because it's a prevention program and has been proven statistically to help decrease CPS calls. If it were to grow, it's possible that we could have our own worker, but just to start, we would share a worker with Madison, and they would handle about 12 to 14 clients.
In the referral from your office, is that something that, where the work and the assessments would be done as a part of other ongoing programs? I'm just trying to, are you taking on a new assessment role or a new referral role, or is this something that is being done now but as part of just ongoing activity?
They're typically going to be clients that we're aware of or have been in contact with, people that we have been working with. However, we are not currently doing that specific screening process. It's a brief screening. It's I believe it's a one-pager. So that process of having an actual application, screening it, and passing it on to Skyline Cap, that will be a new step, but it's not very labor-intensive.
Yeah. Okay.
What brings the clients to your attention that you would screen for consideration?
Well, oftentimes we'll get calls such as substance-exposed infants, or calls from hospitals where we have potential cases where there may not be a child abuse and neglect case, but there's a potential for it to evolve into one. And so those clients would be those that we would refer. I would also like to make the hospitals and the Department of Health aware that the program's back in our community and we can get referrals from the hospital. A lot of the referrals come directly from the hospital, even if it's not a CPS report of abuse and neglect.
Does this in any way interface with the visiting nurse programs that are available in different, I know some parts of the state have visiting nurses that every newborn, somebody comes and talks to the mother and knows how to feed them, how to do all that sort of stuff.
Right, this is a different program, but it's similar in that if there is, if it's an at-risk family and the mother is potentially, needs some education or needs help learning how to care for her newborn, this is an in-home service, so the worker does go into the home, which is a huge benefit. This allows us to get eyes and ears in the home and help out before the situation escalates to potential abuse and neglect.
Do we have visiting nurses that make calls on newborns, or is that?
We do not, through our agency.
I know we don't. Do you know if the Department of Health has that, or the hospitals have that? Because that'd be a good source of finding the problem before it exists.
Dr. Karchner, he mentioned a visiting nurse program, but I believe he mentioned that it was very expensive, and my understanding was it was not in place, but I cannot answer that for certain. I don't think that we have one in place at this time, yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Crystal? All right, anyone want to make a motion to authorize county administrator to sign an MOU?
I would move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Okay, county attorney's report?
I have nothing before the closed session, but I will have something after.
Okay. All right. County administrator's report, Madison Garden subdivision.
Yes, sir.
CDBG
This
planning
is
grant.
just an informational item for you gentlemen. As you know, we received a $30,000 planning grant from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development to look at preparing a preliminary engineering report and cost estimates for connecting properties within the Madison Gardens neighborhood to public sewer owned and operated by the town of Orange. As you all know, there are lots in these subdivisions served by individual on-site septic systems that have failed or will likely fail in the future. This is a subdivision of low to moderate income households and certainly are income eligible for this type of grant work. We've had a planning strategy meeting. It was our representative, Mr. Doug Ellis, came down. The report, the budget, everything is in place. We are procuring our engineering services to prepare the preliminary engineering report. Everything appears on track. Certainly want to thank Susan Turner for doing a lot of the coordinating of this, but also Stephanie and Amanda stepped in when we thought we were able to go through our existing services contract for the engineering services. The state felt we didn't meet their tests, so we went back, rebooted, and have gone through that. So at the end of the day, we will be back with you probably at the 18th meeting with an engineering firm to conduct the preliminary engineering strategy. And also, we're procuring this firm will be able to do the engineering should we go for a construction grant if we apply, or we go ultimately apply for construction grant for the extension of the sewer service. So, any questions? But I just keep you on the loop.
All right. Operating budget guidance.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Glenda's here. I'm going to let her turn it over. As you all know, we're working through our reorganization, and one of those elements is that Glenda is going to take even greater role than in years past with developing the county's operating budget. I'll certainly be party all to that, but we felt this was probably a good kickoff time for Glenda.
Right. So this is our annual meeting where we ask the board for some guidance and as we prepare for the upcoming budget, which is FY20. We have already sent materials out to both external entities and department heads, and we'll be awaiting their requests. They're due in at the end of December. So in January, we'll begin to get a good idea of how expenditures and revenues are lining up in the aggregate. We did also just receive our audited financial statements from the auditors. I think the board has been given a copy of that, and it does reflect that for the year ended June 30th, 2018, we added $1.4 million to general fund balance. That happened because we came under on the expenditure side, and we also did outperformed our revenue estimates on the revenue side. The unassigned portion of the general fund balance totaled about $20.7 million, and was 22.58% of operating expenditures per your adopted policy. The dollar amount at that point in time, over and above the 18% that's required in the policy, was $3.9 million, just to give you an idea of how much money that equates to. In addition to that update, I guess, on how we actually ended fiscal year 18, I wanted to give you an idea of kind of what our revenue growth is looking like. So I did just a very finalized version of a revenue projection. And I've listed there the assumptions I used. I continued to use the 1% in real property values, though I know, we do have a reassessment coming up. But we are limited, as you know, by code to the 1% growth unless, you specifically choose to do something differently. I use 2.5% increases for personal property, 5% for other local taxes and permits and privilege licenses, 2% for fines and forfeitures. I used just 0.5% in interest earnings because we have seen a lot of growth in interest earnings. In fact, we did a supplemental appropriation during this fiscal year to appropriate another $100,000 in the general fund to fund our reorganization. So I tried to err on the side of conservatism there. I used 3% in miscellaneous and 1% in intergovernmental revenues. And if you look at the chart below, you'll see that for fiscal 18, for instance, in the category of miscellaneous revenue, we ended up collecting $455,000. The FY19 or current year budget is only $302, but you have to remember that all the donations and insurance reimbursements that we receive go into that miscellaneous category, and we never include those in the original budget. They're always just as it happens and done by supplemental appropriation during the year. So that's why for projection purposes, I kind of started with the current year's budget. But that's sort of gives you the overview of where I think the revenues are going. As I said, we did have expenditures under for FY18 by a total of $2.6 million, and the largest part of that amount was the school appropriation with a little more than $700 left in the school operating appropriation. We may yet receive a carry forward request for some of that, at least for some of the grant funded programs, but we have not received that
We
to date.
think that's about 140, if I recall.
Yeah, I think he said,
And
yeah.
these were state grants and also federal dollars or so, but these were restricted funds for the purpose.
Right. We also had about $313,000 left in the appropriation for DSS, and that was really a function of, as we continue to have the new administration there, and they're really being aggressive about being able to claim reimbursements under the state and federal. So we're doing better there, which is resulting in less local funding needed. But those two things together were $1 million of the savings. We also had, our carry forwards, which were about $275,000. We had several departments that had a significant amount of savings, the sheriff's office, animal shelter, and tourism, and a large part of those were due to turnover within those departments.
Vacancy savings.
Right. So that is sort of the background information, and I'm just ready to, hear from the board on what your priorities are, any kind of guidance that you can offer as we receive these requests, and try to put the revenues to the expenditures will be appreciated.
Did you give any guidance or instructions to the department heads that when you sent out your request, any information for them to?
What we told them, was that we are still having relatively slow growth in revenues, with about a 1% in real estate. So, we didn't restrict them in any way, by saying, your total can only go up by 2% or 5% or whatever like that. But we did just say we're continuing to see a slow, improvement in revenues. We've also provided them forms for, making requests for additional positions or changes to, to our existing positions. But, we didn't, restrict them as we have done in, really lean times.
And the CIP part of this, I see it that way. I know it's a separate process, but at the end, it all has to balance.
Right.
Where are we? Is that,
We had hoped we would have been completed about a month ago, month and a half, actually, end of October, with Dr. Sneed's coming on and working through what the schools and school board has. They still haven't put their projects together in order for us to get them loaded in. Stephanie has been doing quite a bit to wrestle the thing to ground. What we've decided to do, Stephanie, can you briefly tell the board what we've decided to do?
I've currently put together all of the county's requests, and I'm going through those and making sure that the project that I turn in is performed. As Brian mentioned, I have received zero updated information from the schools, so their information is stagnant at this point in time. And I am working with Michelle to schedule individual meetings with you all over the next week. And
Right.
then we'll present on the 18th.
What I've talked to Dr. Sneed is, we've gone with what was approved as part of the CIP last year, and just up in, and that's what we did, and he was fine with that, given where they're a little bit of influx. We have scheduled, or we'll be scheduling individual meetings with you all next week, or week after next. Next week. Next week, I'm sorry. And then formally present the CIP to you all on the 18th.
Yes, the work session on the 18th.
The work session on the 18th is the first step in this process. But if you remember, CIP is a plan. Year one then translates into the budget. I would also draw your attention to the revenues that came out of the CAFR, Combined Annual Fiscal Report, that were above the 18%, the 3.9 million. Gentlemen, those funds are one-time funds that are certainly available for capital projects. And I think when you see the CIP and we walk you through that there are some definite needs out there that may use a portion of those funds.
I have no doubt you'll find a home for some of it.
My colleagues and I agreed that was probably a good thing to get out there today.
Right, because I don't know if you remember, but even in last year's CIP, this fiscal year for 20 was substantially higher
Right.
than the FY19 number. And the other thing that's gonna come into play is that, we had appropriated, the excess general fund reserves 3 years ago, and FY19, the current fiscal year, is the last year that we're using any of that. So I think it's $772,500 in capital and another $160 in debt service. So even to get to the same place, we'll be filling that gap.
Well, in terms of overall guidance, I think much as we did last year, the policies that we put in place in 2015, I think it was, seemed to still be applicable to going forward. And I would say that the overall guidance is to continue processing according to those policies. We'll see what you get when you get the request back in from the various departments. Anybody have any other words of wisdom for Glenda in the process? Okay.
And I would just add that those policies that you all adopted have served this board well. I believe it has served the county's taxpayers well, as affirmed by Standard & Poor's and Moody's in reaffirming their rating because of our adherence to those financial policies and doing our work. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, board comment, anyone? All right. Anything? Okay. Any questions on the information items? Any appointments?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
The Thomas Jefferson Area Community Criminal Justice Board, Mr. Bayer would serve another term, so I've nominated him for it.
And I heard from Neil Goodlow, who represents the board, and he had nothing but great things to say about Mr. Bayer. They really appreciate the input that he gives as far as a citizen representative, and maybe not someone that is oriented on criminal justice. He gives a new perspective, so he spoke very highly of him.
Okay, well, that's my nomination.
All right. I'd also like to nominate Stacy Burleson for another term on the Parks and Rec Foundation Board.
Allison, have we heard from Jeff Earnhardt or Sean Gregg?
We haven't. I know that,
Yes, they both sent me texts today, emails today saying they're.
good.
They'd
So we
like
were
to be on
working on
again.
it.
Okay, so I would nominate Mr. Earnhardt, and Mr. Gregg.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any others? Youth Council, Youth Commission, we talked about, so. All right. All in favor of those appointments, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Okay. Calendar. Let's see. Any calendar items? Don't think so. Okay. All right. Time to recess for closed meeting. We reconvene for public comment and one public hearing on or about 7 o'clock, so.
Ready? Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Orange County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following: discussion, consideration of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, or disciplining with respect to the planning department; discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose; where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position, negotiating strategy of public body concerning property in the town of Orange; consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of public body concerning DSS; consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel with respect to the Lake of the Woods zoning, airport zoning, social services payment owed, Germana Wilderness Area Plan, Booster Park, and Spotsylvania County border. And whereas pursuant to sections 2.2, 37, 11A1, A3, A7, and A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Orange County does hereby authorize discussion of 4 state matters in closed meeting. Need that as a motion.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And when you said 7, did you need today or tomorrow?
I should have asked for the reading first and pick up our regular agenda. Next item is public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment, Allison?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 speakers. The first is Ash Laughlin,
Okay.
resident of Rapidan.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members. I'll try to be as brief as I can. Just wanted to touch base again. I was here at your meeting before last, and just maybe a little update, what I've learned, and just to let you know. I've got a petition regarding the traffic issues that we have in Rapidan. I now have 64 signatures on this. I just acquired 14 signatures from the members of the Keswick Hunt Club, who are equally concerned about the traffic that's coming through Rapidan. They're worried about their dogs getting run over. They're worried about their riders getting run over. We're worried about our kids getting run over, everything. So just so you know, 64 constituents, 64 people that live in this area are dramatically concerned about what's going on. If you haven't really looked at the road recently, I really think it's worth sitting down there for just a few minutes at rush hour, just at the church down there, to see how many people come through Rapidan now. It has dramatically increased in the last 3 years, dramatically, exponentially. Alan Saunders finally got back to me and said that he's got temporary feedback signs in the loop But that's a promise I've had for 2 years, that it's been in the loop, that these feedback signs are coming. And it turns out that these feedback signs are floating signs. They're not for Rapidan. They're not gonna be permanent. They're not gonna tell us anything, except they'll be here when we can get them there. So that's not much of a fix. That doesn't help us at all. It temporarily fixes it. I would really like to see more from Alan than I've seen to date. I feel kind of like well, anyway, we've talked about this before. I'd like to see our roads removed from Waze and Google Maps and Apple Maps. And it turns out that Alan did finally contact him and just told these 3 agencies that the bridge is lower than 14 feet, so don't let tractor trailers come through on Route 614 on the Culpeper side of Rapidan. That's all he's done. I've been promised, and you may recall, Brian, back originally when we first met, about 2 years ago at least, that was one of our first things we talked about as a real positive thing that we could do. And that is to talk to those 3 companies and say, please take this road off of your maps, your mapping devices, so that people don't come through here. Again, I cannot stress enough that if you just look at it, you will see that the traffic has really increased on Rapidan Road. A lot of that is commuter and just run through. A lot of it is coming from the quarries. I would like to see a traffic study done, again, a new traffic study, to see what flow is, to see what types of traffic are coming through here. This kind of study can't be done in a weekend, it can't be done in 1 week. It needs to be over a period of time so you can see genuinely what kind of traffic is coming through here. It's amazing the difference that has occurred. I really honestly think there should be an environmental study done to see what is happening with the pollution that is caused from these trucks, from these cars coming through here. I sat out putting Christmas lights up yesterday and choked on how much exhaust was coming up on my hill right there. That's not good if you're standing in your front yard and you're choking on exhaust. Just not. There's kids, there's families. So I'd like to see an environmental study done and an impact study done to see what it's doing to our property values. One of my associates in this endeavor has a letter from one of our local realtors that states unequivocally that our property values are being affected by this traffic coming through here. That's tax revenue, but that's also my money that's being affected by the lack of effort, the lack of what's happening in regards to dealing with this huge traffic issue. Huge. So, what do we need to do to get more help? What do we need to do to get satisfaction, to get somebody to address these concerns? We sat here earlier and I heard there's a dip in the road. Oh, I'll get right on that. We're saying there's hundreds of trucks coming through, sometimes 200 trucks a day coming up our roads going in front of the high school here in town, yet nothing gets done about it. Hundreds of cars roaring through, not obeying the speed limits in Rapidan at all, and nothing's being done about it at all. So I just don't get it. I've been trying for 2 years to get something done with this. And so it's just super frustrating. You may be able to tell that. But I don't know if I can address you directly and ask you, what can you do to help us?
Public comment period is, you speak, we listen.
Okay. If there's some way that I could be informed as to how I can actually have a list of my concerns addressed and how they're being addressed, I'd like to know how that could happen. Because to date, none of it has been addressed adequately as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Cindy Pipes Johnson, resident of Rapidan.
Good evening. I was here last month in the November 14th meeting talking about Rapidan, and I'm back again tonight. Just to paint a quick picture, Rapidan is a wonderful place to live. I feel blessed to live there. Rapidan is was designated as a National Historic District. It's on the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register of Historic Places. There are 3 churches in Rapidan, one of them Waddell Memorial Presbyterian Church, is listed in the Virginia Landmarks Register and also a National Register of Historic Places. In addition, the little schoolhouse in Rapidan is on the Virginia Historic Landmark Register. In Rapidan, there are 3 lively churches, a country store, a post office, the Rapidan Volunteer Fire Department, and there's also a well-established group, the Rapidan Historic Foundation, which is a nonprofit group that gets together regularly. We have picnics at historic farms around the area. We have local authors come in to speak, and we regularly pick up trash along the side of the road for the state of Virginia. Route 615 is a Virginia Scenic Byway, whose criteria from the VDOT website says that Virginia Scenic Byway, the criteria is the route links together or provides access to scenic, historic, recreational, cultural, natural, and archaeological elements. Okay, check. That's Rapidan. We've got a river there. We've got history. We've got a lot of things going on. The route must bypass major roads or provides opportunities to leave high-speed routes for variety and leisure in motoring. Okay, that's going to be an issue because these big trucks are on the road. The route must allow for additional features that will enhance the motorist's experience and improve safety. So it's a Virginia Scenic Byway. We should be so proud to have one of those in Orange, going to a wonderful historic area, and we should be very, very happy and feel very good about Orange County being part of all of that. I'd just like to very quickly read an email that I sent to Teal and Sheriff Mark Amos last week. I'll just read part of it because I know, it says, while I know there's nothing that can be done now, I wanted to send this email to document 2 incidents on Route 615 that I recently observed while driving to and from Rapidan and Orange. On Thursday, November the 8th at approximately 7:19 a.m. as I was headed towards Orange to work, just past Retreat Farm's main gate, a gravel truck in the opposite lane was headed towards Rapidan. The truck just came past Piedmont Farm going over the little bridge there, and the wheels of the truck on the driver's side were over the yellow line on my side of the road. I had to slow down to make sure he was back in the correct lane before I went over the bridge. I don't have any detailed information about the truck. I was just trying to stay on my side of the road and not get hit. This past week, I got really upset. I was on my way home at my lunchtime to let our dogs out, coming from Orange to Rapidan on November the 27th. That's Tuesday at approximately 12:19. On the stretch of 615 between Trimmers Road and Mount Sharon Road, there was a gravel truck that had followed me. I went by the high school. It was right behind me. I turned right to head towards Rapidan. It turned right to head towards Rapidan also. When we got to the stretch of Route 615 between Trimmers Road and Mount Sharon Road, the truck went over the double line and the entire truck was in the wrong lane for several seconds. I counted 3 or 4 seconds. I was looking in my rear view mirror, and of course I was driving about 45 miles an hour, and I needed to keep my eyes on the road. So at least 3 or 4 seconds. This happened just after a car had passed us in the other lane. Now why that truck went over into the other lane, I don't know. I did get a picture of the truck, and I can pass that around. The picture is once the truck was back in the correct lane. So again, while I know no action can be taken for those 2 incidences, I did want the sheriff to know, and I wanted Teal to know, that these are things that I'm one person, and this happened twice in 1 month that I observed something. And as previously said, there's a lot of traffic, so other people probably are seeing similar things. I don't know, and I don't want to assume things. I really am asking that the Board of Supervisors, which is the proper governing branch, you must ask the Virginia Commonwealth Transportation Board to do a thorough truck regulation study, a study that would gather data so we can honestly see what is going on Route 16. I am observing, but we need data from the Department of Transportation. So again, I just ask that, you know, Alan Saunders was here, I've emailed with him. He's using words like huge safety improvement, help increase visibility, crash reduction, rumble strips, and I don't hear Route 615 mentioned at all. So this is not something that's brand new. There's a lot of history of going back and forth between Culpeper County, Orange County, Board of Supervisors. VDOT told me to call Orange Transportation, you know, I just need y'all's help. I need y'all to take time, please look at this issue, it's very important. And again, we do have a petition with quite a few signatures on it. I'll go ahead and give you a copy of the email that I sent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. That the last speaker?
Yes, sir,
Okay,
Mr.
we'll close the public comment period. All right, public hearing for tonight, 18:02. Is someone going to introduce us to this, or?
Yeah, Sandra, if you come forward. We weren't sure exactly how to proceed on this, and so.
We have all the materials in our packet, but if you'd like to give us a brief summary, that's fine, just for the record.
Just for the record, I will, and I'm gonna be hampered slightly because I've just realized that for some reason the staff report is not in the file that I brought with me.
Oh, okay.
But,
We could lend you one of ours.
and I apologize, I went to pull it out, it's like, oh, that's not there. But, just very briefly, as you know, this is an application by A&K Development, for a zoning map amendment on tax parcel, 12-35A. The zoning map classification is proposed to, change from agricultural to, R4, multifamily residential, to accommodate the development of, senior housing development. The property is located, as you also know, on Route 3, approximately 2,000 feet north of the entrance to Lake of the Woods, and it's adjacent to Germana Villas, a parcel that had previously been the subject of a rezoning. It's in District 4. The effective acreage is 11.22 acres. This proposal seems to be very consistent with the goals and objectives of the Germana Wilderness Area Plan, and with the proffers that had been presented by the applicant, staff is recommending approval of this. The Planning Commission voted unanimously also to recommend approval. And I believe I was not present for the Planning Commission public hearing, but I believe there was no public comment presented at that meeting, and no comment has been received, no comment was received in the office prior to that meeting.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We usually offer the opportunity for the applicant to make a few comments if they would like. It's not mandatory, but if you would like.
Mr. Chairman, member of the board, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Mansour Azimpour. I'm president of A&K Development Corporation, 4444 Germana Highway, Locust Grove, Virginia, 22508. This project will be a part of the one that's already been rezoned. It's going to be all for age restricted, 55 and better age. Last public hearing, someone asked how it's going to be enforced. The association is going to enforce that nobody under the age is going to live there. That's going to be the enforcement that we have. And we have some volunteer proffer that we offered that definitely is not going to be anything other than 55 and older. Roads are going to be built to a state specification. All units are going to have public water and sewer. And land clearing is going to be the way that we are going to stay away from all of the streams and all of those. And we have enough setback as required. and we have dedicated potential easement access if flat run gonna get close enough that we can have another entrance based on the requirement that it was there. And I'd be happy to answer any question if there is any.
Okay, any questions for Spencer? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we have one speaker.
Okay.
Doug Rogers, 113 Birchside Circle, Locust Grove.
Okay, Mr. Rogers?
You know what it feels like, right, too?
Yes.
Doug Rogers, 113 Birchside Circle, Locust Grove, Virginia. I want to make one thing clear. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not representing Lake of the Woods. Okay? Just making sure that's there in the record. I support the change in request submitted by A&K. Like he said, it is part of the GWAP program. We have been wanting a 55 and older at our end of the county for a long time. In fact, this weekend I found another couple that's moving to Ashbury Ponds up there. But I think we've lost 20 to 25 couples, Lee.
Probably that, right?
Something like that up there. Because they have no choice other than to go up there or go to Richmond, which some other couples have done. I've also asked Monsieur to save me a place in about 10 years.
You'll be 55 in 10 years?
The 55 and older type of stuff, because at that point in time, I might be Lee's age. But I do support it, and again, I speak for myself. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Anyone else?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Close the public hearing. Okay.
Motion to approve.
All right, is there a second? Second. I have a motion and a couple of seconds. All right, discussion, any questions, comments?
This is completely consistent, as I understand it, with the land use map as it is drawn up and the long-term plans for the area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. The only question I had, and it probably hasn't come up yet and doesn't really need to, but I just want to point it out for the record. The access easement with respect to the potential future realignment of 601, there's no width or length or anything specified about that. I think the language is such that it's, the intent is to provide what VDOT engineers will ultimately be requesting. And so I think it's, if that's the understanding that.
That's correct, because all of the roads are gonna be a state specification.
Right.
This is not gonna be an exception.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments anyone has? Okay. Let's do a roll call, please.
Mr. Crozier?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Frame?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin?
Aye.
5-0.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations, you're in business. Okay. We will now return.
Mr. Chairman, I have one item.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Chairman, we have a partnership comprised of H.B. Sedgwick III, Stephen Sedgwick, and Rodney Sedgwick that would like to donate a parcel of property to the county, specifically 315 Waugh Boulevard, which is 2.47 acres, or 2.74 acres of land and a 57,000 square foot building. They have prepared a deed of gift, but the county cannot accept that deed of gift unless the Board of Supervisors votes to receive the gift. So if the board would like to make a motion to accept this deed of gift, then.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any discussion, any questions for the county attorney? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Okay. Anything else? If not, we'll return to closed session. Yep.
Members of the board, to the best of your knowledge, were the only matters discussed in the closed meeting, public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and that only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Mr. Goodwin?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Frame?
Aye.
And Mr. Crozier?
Aye.
Is there a motion?
Being no further